I was in absolute tears by the end of the last episode of the 19th season of Arthur. This is such a fantastic episode. It's called The Last Day, and it's the last day of preschool for DW and Bud, and the last day of third grade for everybody else. And I did kind of think this really should have been the last episode, or the penultimate episode. I've seen the last episode of Arthur, and I mean, it's a pretty great idea. But I feel like this should have been the penultimate episode that aired alongside this. So this is a double feature, and it's just beautiful. And I will tell you why I ended up in floods of tears, but it will be a spoiler. So I'll discuss that at the very end. I'm still kind of choked up. I've just finished watching it and had to kind of compose myself for this because it's a beautiful episode. But it also took me back to my own childhood, and DW and Bud are starting to try and act like big kids, but they have to learn that actually, while going to kindergarten is a big step up. They're not expected to act the way that, Arthur and LaDonna do. They're not expected to just act like grown up children all of a sudden, and they have to learn that. And I feel like that's probably something I don't remember being that age, but I imagine that probably is some apprehension because if you're going up to big kids school, it's fair to not really be able to distinguish kindergarten from any of the grades above it. So yeah, I can understand where they're coming from, and I think there are some important messages there. Arthur and the gang are speculating about which teacher they'll get for fourth grade, and they meet this new teacher who's called MC. He's called Mike Cramp, which I have to say, a brilliant name, voiced by BJ Novak. And to start off with, they think he's pretty cool and they're desperate to get him as their teacher for fourth grade. But then they start to reflect on the year, and you can see glimmers in their mind of appreciation for Mr. Ratburn, and they begin to realise that maybe having a cool teacher would be fun, but what Mr. Ratburn gave them is so much more valuable. And I won't say, of course, what happens as a result of that, or what happens with the last day of school, but I am curious to see what happens with the next episode in the 20th season, because as I said, if they're leaving third grade, are they in the fourth grade in the next episode? And of course I will find out within the next half an hour or an hour, because I will go straight on to that episode. I'm really eager to find out. Or will it just be like every other episode of Arthur where the past events sometimes matter but generally not? So I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see what happens with that. I can't actually remember the last episode. I can't remember where, if it mentioned what grade they were in. So we'll see. But as I said, it just doesn't feel like it should have been the last episode of season 19, unless they thought season 19 was going to be the last and they thought they weren't going to get recommissioned for a 20th season, in which case, completely understand if that was the case. But it's a really enjoyable, moving, emotional episode. So I guess spoilers from now, I'll discuss what really choked me up. There are two things. And the first one is when they realised the value of Mr. Ratburn and they sang a song to him. And I was somebody who, I loved my primary school teachers. There isn't a single primary school teacher I did not like. And when you get to the end of the year, it's sad because that teacher has been in your life all day, every day, 5 days a week for what, 10 months, depending on how long you're at school for over the year. They become so important to you, and you have learned and grown because of them. And when you love that teacher, it's difficult to say goodbye. And it really just kind of took me back to being that age and seeing them really appreciating Mr. Ratburn, because obviously Mr. Ratburn is strict, he pushes them, he's critical, and we see this. We've seen this over the last 19 seasons, but he does it in a way that's coming from a place of love, love for the job, and of respect for his students and respect for their abilities, knowing that they are capable of more than they may believe about themselves, and they've achieved whatever they've achieved because of him. And I think we all know that teachers often don't get enough credit, especially primary school teachers. I think a lot of people think that teaching primary school children is the easiest job in the world because if you can count to 10 and know your primary colours, what more do you need? But of course, that's ludicrous. It's definitely not an easy job. Not that I'm speaking from experience, but I've had I've been in primary school classes where children have been unruly and difficult. But Mr. Ratburn is an incredible teacher, and it really choked me up, and took me back to my childhood. And I was a mess. I was a mess and crying about how beautiful this episode was. And then, of course, it popped up at the end saying that this was in memory of Greg Kramer, who voiced Nemo. And actually, I don't know that much about Greg Kramer. He was actually born in England, which I didn't know, and I wouldn't have guessed from his voice work for Nemo. But this comes not that many episodes after we lost the actor who voiced Mr. Healy, Walter Massey. And I just thought, obviously the show's been going on for so many years that it's just like, this is going to become more regular, and it wouldn't surprise me if there are more of these in the next few seasons. And this just happens as time goes on and shows last for a very long time. And it got to me. It really got to me. So it's such a beautifully done episode. Really made me cry, and then hit me with that at the end. I thought, oh, thanks. But needless to say, this is a wonderful end to the 19th season. Slightly confused as to why they did this in the 19th season, but as I said, if they thought this was the last season for any reason, then yeah, this would have been a beautiful, gorgeous ending to Arthur. But thankfully, we still have a few more seasons left. Not as many episodes, but a few more seasons. Looking forward to seeing what happens in the next one. Needless to say, I really thoroughly enjoyed this one.